Princess Diana once said, "Family is the most important thing in the world." And to me, family is the most important thing. The first people I call to tell about good news or to ask for advice when I'm having a problem are my family members. And it has always been of the utmost importance to me, but it's even more special now that I've experienced a personal loss. My grandparents on my mother's side were both born and raised in Brooklyn. They met each other in high school. My grandfather Lou grew up as the middle child with two brothers. His father and his mother were both Italian. My great-grandfather worked as a printer and had gotten his hand caught in a printing press at one point and had lost some fingers on his left hand, which would have been scary to his great-grandchildren, I would imagine, but I've heard that his huge personality and effervescent spirit more than made up for this handicap. I never got to meet him because he died before I was born, but according to my brother and sister, he really was great. My grandmother was the youngest of 10 children. She was primarily raised by her mother, who was straight off the boat from Italy. My grandmother doesn't remember her father because he died when she was just 2 years old. He had worked for a laundromat and was taking clothes out of the dryer, but there was a rusty pin that pricked him and he got tetanus and died. While she experienced some hardships without her father, the fact that her mother and older siblings were able to support the family meant that my grandmother never lost her childhood. She was able to graduate from high school and then go to work while she was dating my grandfather. My grandmother used to tell me stories about when she worked at the Daily News before she was married, and she would always tell me about how she met Cary Grant and Clark Gable. I'm not really sure if these stories were true, but it's always fun to think about how she possibly met these movie stars, especially judging from her pictures where she's always posed like a movie star herself. My grandparents met through mutual friends when they had graduated from high school. My grandmother's friend Gaston was infatuated with her, but she really wasn't very intrigued by him. He kept trying to get her to date him, but she always turned him down. One night, my grandmother finally agreed to go out with Gig, as he was called, but only if they both agreed to bring some friends. Gig brought his friend Lou, and my grandmother brought her friend Rosalie. Gig instantly fell for Rosalie, and Rosalie fell for Gig, while my grandparents fell for each other. My grandparents are still together today, and Gig and Rosalie were together until they passed away a few years ago. At this point, my grandparents are rounding off almost 60 years of being married together, and in this day and age, that is a very, very big feat. I know very, very little of my father's parents. I know that his mother was of Italian descent, while his father was Danish. My father was one of 10 kids and was the oldest boy. His parents were not the best parents, and when my father graduated from high school, he immediately joined the Navy so that he could have a fighting chance at a semblance of leading a good life. My mother was born into a more privileged existence. Her father worked extremely hard as a salesman to provide a good life for his family. My mother is the oldest of 3 children and was able to grow up with want for very little and was able to go to college because her parents felt very strongly about education, unlike my father's parents who, if anything, did not persuade their children from furthering their education. In fact, they dissuaded them. My parents met at a hospital. My father was working as an electrician at the hospital, and my mother was working in the dietary department. My dad used to joke about how he fell for my mom because she burned his eggs. I don't know if that's a true story, but judging from the way that she cooks, it could definitely be the truth. My parents met the summer before my mom went back to college for her senior year. My father worked at the hospital during the year, and my mom's mother volunteered there. While my mother was away at school, she wondered why my dad didn't write to her, because at those times, obviously, there was no other form of communication besides talking on the phone occasionally and writing letters back and forth. So my mother wondered why my father never wrote. So, of course, my grandmother, being the nosy woman that she is, went up to my father at the hospital and asked him why he didn't write my mom any letters, because she thought that he really liked her when she had met him a couple of times. My father told my grandmother that he had started several letters, but none of them had been good enough, so he threw them away. He was actually a lot like that, because even though he wasn't as educated as my mother was in the book sense, he definitely was a very, very smart person and could be like that, where he would never think anything was good enough and get rid of it. So with this explained, when my mother came home from college after she had graduated, she and my father started dating and eventually were married. About a year after my parents were married, my brother Chris was born. They didn't waste any time after they get married, I guess, to have kids, which is definitely strange in today's day and age, but very, very common back in the day. In 1983, 4 years after my brother and my sister came along, and then lastly, I arrived. We were one big, happy family for the most part until 2004. In 2004, our world got changed drastically when my father was diagnosed with cancer. It's a rare form of cancer at the time, which is actually becoming more and more frequent, and it is called multiple myeloma. And it's a blood cancer. And I had never really thought about cancer too much, except in passing when I had read brief newspaper stories about it. And anything I had heard or seen of cancer usually had a positive outcome, so it was quite a shock to me when my father died. In my wildest dreams, I never thought about how much my life would change. The flurry of emotions that I have gone through has been immense, and I can say that it has been almost 6 years, and not one day has gone by where I don't think of my father. While I've grown up as a person since then, I would much prefer to live with my naivety and self-involvement if it meant that I would be able to be with my father and that he would still be alive. I can easily say that this is the moment that has defined my life thus far. While I've become a better person and my family has grown much closer, it has also been a constant struggle to get over the loss of someone so wonderful and great in my eyes. While he wasn't perfect in every single way, there were many times when he was absolutely wonderful, and I won't ever forget the bad things about him, but I will also never forget the good things, and they by far outweigh anything bad. My father's parents died about a year after my father, and I can honestly say that I didn't really feel much, but the feelings of losing anyone else in my family would not be good ones at all. Family is the most important thing in my life. I consider my friends my family also, and so my friends to me are absolutely some of the closest people that I have ever met, and I would try my hardest to love my friends and my family as much as humanly possible. There will never be a time when I will give up my value of family in order to achieve another goal, and for that I am most proud.